The dress was waiting for its moment. I had been choosing it for a long time, imagining how it would look during the ceremony. Delicate lace, delicate train, perfect cut. Every detail was thought out. It was supposed to be a dream wedding, and I had no doubt that it would be the beginning of our perfect story together. I was so happy. The days before the wedding were filled with pleasant chores. Last fittings, meetings with decorators, choosing flowers. Together we looked at music options, decided what kind of wine would be served to the guests. I loved these moments. They were filled with anticipation of joy, expectation of something bright. There was only a week left. I saw everyone around me worried, but I felt calm. I knew that I was making the right choice, that this was the man I wanted to be with for the rest of my life. He was attentive, caring, and knew how to make me happy. When I said I was tired, he brought me tea. When I was worried, he hugged me and assured me that everything would be fine. That morning he wrote me that he loved me and that he couldn't wait to see me. These were the last words I received from him. And then there was silence. At first it didn't seem strange. I thought he was just busy. But hour after hour I began to feel anxious. He always found a minute to answer, even on the busiest days. I dialed his number. Nothing. The messages went unread. The next day the fear became unbearable. I called his friends. They hadn't seen him. No one knew where he was. I went to his apartment, but the door remained locked. I waited, walking back and forth, listening for familiar footsteps. But there was nothing. He had disappeared. Rumors spread quickly. At first people said that he might have just left, taken a break. But with each passing day the versions became worse. Friends whispered behind my back. They thought he was afraid of responsibility. That maybe he had found someone else. That maybe I was just not seeing the obvious. I didn't believe a word of it. It was impossible. Every night I sat in his apartment waiting for him to come back. I searched everything, trying to find at least some clue, a note, a trace. But his things were still there. His phone was turned off. It was as if he had been erased from this world. The wedding day came. I stood in front of the mirror in my dress. No makeup, no hair, just looking at my own reflection. Emptiness in my eyes. There were no tears, no anger. Only an incomprehensible cold abyss inside. People were waiting for an answer. Someone said he was a coward. Some felt sorry for me. Some even mocked me for being too naive. Everyone was building theories, looking for a sensation. I didn't listen. All the following months were like an endless dream. As if my life no longer belonged to me. Everything we had built came crashing down in one day. All the memories, all the dreams of the future. I didn't know what to do next. Emptiness became my only companion. Time did not heal. Days turned into months, and the pain remained as acute as ever. At first I believed it was temporary, that he would come back and explain everything. He had to have a reason. I woke up every morning with this thought, convincing myself that I was about to hear his voice. But a month, a second, a third passed and he never showed up. I couldn't just give up. Desperation made me look for answers. I went around to all our mutual friends, but their reactions were the same. They avoided the topic. Some changed the conversation, others shrugged their shoulders, saying they didn't know anything themselves. I saw sympathy in their eyes, but it only made me angry. They saw me as a victim. As someone who had been betrayed, deceived, abandoned. But I didn't want pity. I wanted the truth. No one spoke directly, but I knew they were gossiping about me. People were used to simple explanations. For them, my story was banal. My husband got scared, ran away, found another woman. The end. But I didn't believe it. He was not that kind of person. It couldn't be true. I looked through all our messages, trying to find a hint that something had gone wrong. But there were only words of love. No warning, no hint of doubt or hesitation. Sometimes I thought that maybe I just didn't see the obvious. On long nights, when the thoughts became unbearable, I convinced myself that I needed to let go. That I couldn't live in the past. That he had made a choice. But every morning I would wake up and return to the same questions. What if he didn't just run away? What if something happened? I walked the same streets as before, desperately trying to find a trace of his presence. His favorite coffee shop, the park where we used to walk, the store where he liked to buy books. But he was nowhere to be found. The city that was once ours was now empty and alien. When I asked his family about him, the answer was the same. He had no contact with them. They were in shock themselves. His mother looked devastated, his father hardly spoke. But even this was somehow unnatural. They did not ask me how I was. They didn't ask how I was going through all this. Their look was strange, as if they knew something but couldn't say. It wasn't just shame or awkwardness. It was something more. I tried to throw him out of my heart. I convinced myself that he had betrayed me, that I needed to move on with my life. But every night my thoughts returned to him. I remembered his look, his voice, all those moments when he seemed like the most honest person in the world. I knew I had to move forward. But the past would not let go. 5 years. This is a long time. It's enough for the world to change. Enough for the people you knew to disappear or become different. Enough to learn to live without someone you once loved more than your own life. But not enough to forget. After he disappeared, I threw myself into work. I've always been ambitious, but now my work was the only thing that kept me in reality. I couldn't afford to fall because there was nowhere to fall. I started teaching more courses, taking on additional projects, and going to conferences. My day was scheduled to the minute. I would get up early, work late, and fall asleep exhausted so as not to think. It was not a life but an escape. But the people around me saw only my strength. They admired me, saying that I was able to get out of what broke others. I learned to smile when they said I was an example. But the evenings were still unbearable. I would come home, kick off my shoes, let my hair down and sit on the couch. The apartment was empty. I avoided changes in my home for a long time, as if I was unconsciously waiting for him to return. His things hadn't been around for a long time, but the atmosphere itself reminded me of him. Little things that no one noticed. An old cup that he loved, a book with bent pages that he used to read, a photo in an album that I couldn't bring myself to destroy. Time passed, but the feeling of his presence did not disappear. I tried to date other men. My friends insisted that I needed a new love. They introduced me to friends, colleagues, and persuaded me to go on dates. I did not object. I was polite, smiling, listening to stories about their hobbies. But every time a man touched my arm or leaned closer, it was as if I was being electrocuted. Everything inside me protested. I looked them in the eyes and realized that I was looking for the wrong ones. That these were not the hands, not the voice, not the looks I wanted to see. None of the new relationships lasted long. I learned how to play the role of a woman who moves on, but there was still an emptiness inside. Work was my salvation. I became successful. I lectured to full audiences, received awards, and was published in prestigious magazines. When I spoke, I felt strong. I knew what I was saying, I was listened to, respected. But every time I was alone, I returned to the night he disappeared. I could forget what I had for breakfast yesterday. I might not remember the names of some of the students. But I never forgot the last week before the wedding. I still remembered his voice, his hug, his smile. I remembered how he held my hand and promised me that everything would be fine. I didn't know if he remembered me. Sometimes I tried to imagine where he was now. Is he alive? Is he happy? Does he think about me as much as I think about him? These thoughts were poison that I could not get rid of. I felt good being alone. It was a lie that I repeated to myself every day. I told it to my friends, I told it to my colleagues, I told it to myself in the mirror. I told myself that I valued my independence, that I liked my freedom. I convinced everyone that I had forgotten him long ago. But every night, when silence crept into my apartment, I knew the truth. The past would not let go. 5 years is a long time. But not enough to erase him from my heart. 5 years during which I built a new life. 5 years during which I slowly picked myself up piece by piece, forced myself to move forward, hid all my memories behind deep layers of rationality and self-control. My life now made sense. Career, students, research. I pushed the past out, drove it into a dark corner of my mind, convincing myself that it no longer had power over me. The audience was completely full. It was an important day, a guest lecture attended not only by my students, but also by colleagues and graduate students. I did not allow myself to be nervous. Over the past 5 years, I have learned to control my every movement, every look, every tone of voice. I stood at the lectern flipping through my notes while people took their seats. Someone was echoing, someone was laughing, someone was quickly finishing the last sentences in their notes. Everything was as usual. I took a breath, gathered my thoughts together and began to speak. My voice sounded confident and I could see the listeners immersing themselves in the topic. I knew what I was doing. I was used to this scene, to this attention. Suddenly there was a sound. The sound of a door. It opened slowly. I automatically looked there, expecting to see a late student or someone from the staff. But in that instant everything changed. Time stopped. I felt the air become heavy, as if all the oxygen had disappeared from the room. It was him. He was standing there in the doorway. The one I hadn't seen in 5 years. The one I had been mourning. The one whose disappearance destroyed me. With the light behind him, with the same physique, with the same look that I once knew to the smallest shade. I stopped hearing the world around me. Only the buzzing in my ears, only the loud pounding of my heart. His hair was a little longer than I remembered. His face was a little tired, matured. But it was him. The real one. Alive. His eyes met mine. I should have said something, reacted somehow. But my body didn't listen. My legs felt like they were stuck to the floor. And then the voice. His voice. The same one I heard in my dreams. A short phrase that cut through the air, that took my breath away. "I'm sorry I'm late." Everyone around me was looking at him and then at me. I could hear my own heart beating. He stood there like a ghost from the past, like a phantom, like someone who shouldn't have been there. He stood there, confident, as if nothing had happened. As if he was just late for an appointment. As if the 5 years of emptiness hadn't happened. He was holding an envelope. I couldn't take my eyes off him. What is it? What was inside? I didn't know how much time had passed. Seconds? Minutes? I was standing in front of hundreds of people and the whole world disappeared. There was only him. Only this moment. And my broken soul, which could no longer hold back the storm. I had to say something. I had to do something. But I stood there in silence. And the whole world around me turned into a blurred background. I didn't notice how my hands clutched the edge of the pulpit. I didn't notice how my breathing became ragged. I didn't notice my fingers trembling. I only knew that if I didn't disappear now, run out, scream, I would break down. But I couldn't move. Because he was standing there. And he was holding an envelope that might contain the answer that would change everything. He was standing in front of me and I couldn't move. We were planning our future together. And now he came back after 5 years of silence. It looked like some kind of nightmare from which I could not wake up. The hall remained in silence, heavy and tense. I could see students looking around at each other, someone taking a photo, but I was immersed in this strange reality that was turning into a horrible memory. His hands were shaking as he held that envelope. His white fingers were pressing on its edges, and I suddenly realized that he was nervous himself, even though he was trying to remain calm. My heart was breaking with pain. Only now did I realize how long I had been waiting for answers to all those questions that had been haunting me. And now, after all these years, he came with an answer. "Why?" was the only thought that ran through my mind. "Why did you leave me? Why did I have to go through all this alone?" But I couldn't say it out loud. I stood there, silently, just looking at him, my eyes filled with disappointment and pain. That moment was enough for him to realize that I was not ready for his explanation. But he stepped forward anyway, remaining calm and not looking away. My hand trembled as I took the envelope and it fell into place. I held it, but my fingers could not withstand the pressure. I couldn't stop looking at it. I knew that what was hidden inside this envelope would change everything. I tore the envelope open and took out a sheet of paper. The text was written in small print, almost unreadable, but I forced myself to read every word. And with each sentence I felt the world around me begin to fall apart. Part 5. The truth that changes everything. Every word on this sheet made me feel like reality was starting to come apart at the seams. I held the envelope and a storm of emotions raged inside me. The tear stains on my cheeks were a testament to how hard it was to accept what I read. I could not understand how my soul was still capable of feeling anything but pain and disappointment. The truth that changes everything. I repeated these words in my mind, but they did not comfort me. They only emphasized that everything I knew about him, about us, was a lie. I tore the envelope open again, forcing myself to reread those words, which were still running through my head like an unfinished sentence. I was forced to leave because of a serious threat. Those words hit me like a hammer on the head. The feeling of shock did not let go. Why didn't he tell me this then? Why didn't he leave any clues even though he knew how worried I was? It hurt that I didn't even have the opportunity to help him because he didn't explain anything. I was alone in all this. I couldn't tell you the truth. It was so scary that I couldn't risk your life. This was another sentence that seemed to pull me out of my thoughts, but did not give me any appropriate answer. Now I understood why he had left. He was forced to. No, I couldn't accept it right away. I began to realize that it was not just a matter of faith or feelings. I had to analyze why all this happened, and why he didn't come back sooner when I needed him so much. I laid the letter on the table and my fingers, which had been holding the sheet with such pressure just a few minutes ago, now just touched it helplessly. My head was filled with thoughts. I could not stop them. I couldn't accept that this was the real reason for his disappearance. Someone made me run away. I read this part of the letter again. Someone. It meant that there was someone more powerful, someone who forced him to act. And why didn't I know about it? How could I have kept it a secret for so long? He continued to write, and every word tore my heart out. He was looking for a way out. A real way out of this trap. He never stopped thinking about me even when he couldn't be with me. I thought it was temporary. I planned to come back to you when things calmed down. But time passed and I couldn't take it anymore. I was looking for a way out. I was looking for ways to free myself from what was happening. He was trying to protect me. He was trying to solve the problem even if I didn't know about it. But why didn't he make me a part of it? Why didn't his plans include me? How could he keep me in the dark when I was trying to build my life, thinking that he had just disappeared without even leaving a note? I read the letter again, and the more I read it, the more it became clear to me. I had to let go of the past. All these years I had been holding on to the fact that he was a part of my life, and now that I knew the truth, my soul could not understand how to cope with this new knowledge. I was shaking. I couldn't stop myself. How could I just disappear like that? How could you leave someone you loved without any explanation? I remembered the day he left. I remembered our last words, our last hug. None of it seemed true after what I was now learning. Everything we had was covered in a wave of lies and secrets. But there was one more part of his words that haunted me. I waited so that you could understand, so that you were not in danger. This was another part of his explanation. He wanted me to stay safe. But why didn't he say that before? Why didn't he share his anxiety with me? I felt my heart and my chest tighten. I didn't know what to feel anymore. My mind was overloaded with this new information. I could not accept that he had kept it all to himself for so long. And at the same time I could feel a part of me remaining in him. Now 5 years later I knew the truth. And it changed everything, but it didn't solve anything. I was torn apart and I couldn't decide if I needed to forgive him or if maybe it didn't matter anymore. I sat in silence, watching the last words of his letter slowly melt into the air, trying to find the strength to understand why my heart was still beating for him. Seemed like time had frozen. I sat at the table reading every word in his letter, but I couldn't figure out what to do now. Everything was mixed up in my head. 5 years had passed and these years had become my life without him, a life where every day was a struggle with myself, with those memories that continued to hurt. And here he was again in front of me with words that sounded so familiar and yet so painfully alien. They were like a promise of what could have been and what was left in the past. I still love you, sounded simpler than everything that had happened between us, but these words brought a peace that I could not recognize. I was confused. I didn't know what to do with them. Could I trust him again? Could I forgive him for the years he had left me? For all the emptiness that filled my heart? A few minutes ago I was sure of my decision. I convinced myself that I had already forgotten him, that my life without him had become complete. I got used to living without him, accepted the pain and even learned to coexist with it. But his words, they brought me back to the moment when I was just a girl in love who dreamed of a future together. As if it all happened yesterday. I saw us again, young and in love. Our walks under the stars, our laughs, the way I felt that my life had no meaning without him. And now I was sitting in front of him and he was holding an envelope with an explanation for everything that had happened. An explanation that I had been waiting for so long, but didn't really know if I wanted to hear. I was forced to flee, the letter read. And although these words did not solve all my questions, they explained his behavior at least a little. I could understand that there was more behind his decision than just his desire to leave. Perhaps he had no choice, perhaps he was really looking for a way to return, but he didn't know how to do it, how to re-enter my life after what had happened. He remained silent. I could see how hard it was for him to go through it. His eyes were full of regret, but I also saw hope in them. Hope that I would be able to forgive him, that I would be able to understand that his disappearance was not just a choice. It was a forced reaction to a threat that was bigger than our feelings. But could I forgive all that? How could I just forget all these years? How can I forget everything I've been through? How can I open my heart again when it has long been cold and closed? Is it possible to regain trust when it was destroyed in such a painful and unfair way? I plunged back into my memories. I remembered the day he disappeared and how I sat looking at the empty bed, how all my plans and dreams just crumbled in my hands. I couldn't believe that he was really gone. And it was hard to accept the fact that everything we had built together was meaningless, that it was just an illusion. But now I looked at him and saw a man who was also suffering. A man who did not know how to explain his actions to me, how to say that he could not do otherwise, and that he had to act in such a way to save our lives. He was no longer the young man I remembered. Time had changed us both. And then I realized that my decision does not depend only on what happened. My decision depends on who I am now, how I have changed. I was not the girl who could live as a victim waiting for the return of what once was. I was a person who had learned to stand on her own. And now I was faced with the question, am I ready to let him back into my life? I looked at him. His face expressed all the regret I had felt for a long time, but was I ready to take him back? And was it even possible to forgive what had happened? I realized that everything I had experienced would not disappear, that he could not just come back and take away my pain. But I couldn't ignore what we had between us. It wasn't just love. It was a part of me, a part of my history that I couldn't reject no matter how hard it was. I began to realize that maybe I was ready for a new beginning. A new beginning, but not on the old terms. Not on the terms of what had happened before. I made a decision. It was my decision and I was ready for it. I was ready to start over with him. It was going to be hard, it was going to be long, and we both had to go through a lot more trials, but I felt it was worth a try. I didn't want to lose this and I didn't want to keep living in the past. I'm ready, I said, even though these words gave me incredible fear. But I also felt something inside me begin to blossom. I might not be able to take it all back, but I could make a choice now. And that choice was to give it a chance. A chance at a new feeling, a chance at a new life. A chance at what we could create together. His eyes lit up. I saw his face change, and although his gaze remained full of regret, he immediately felt that I accepted his return. We sat in silence. It was not the silence of pain, but the silence of hope. The silence in which we realized that everything could still be changed. That there is a chance for a new beginning. And maybe it won't be a perfect recovery, but it will be our new beginning. And this became a real happiness for us.